You're watching Fox 17 News, Nashville in Focus.
Happy Sunday morning, everybody. I'm Scott Couch. This is the last time we will be together before Christmas. So on behalf of everybody here in the Fox 17 family, Merry Christmas to you and yours. We're talking politics as what we do 6:30 on Sunday morning. 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, civil conversation. I know you're not accustomed to that, but that's what we're trying to bring to the conversation. Let me introduce our guests and we'll wade in. Steve Gill back with us, conservative analyst and publisher of TristarDaily.com, which is a conservative news website. Check that out. Jasper Hendricks right beside him, Democratic strategist and Fair the Metro Chair Board. Good to see you, sir. I know you're heavily traveled this week, so good to have you in. Gracie Freeman back with us. She's a Democratic Party organizer. And Trace Whittam is a former Tennessee Senate aide and also a congressional candidate. You may have seen his name on your ballot. You may have voted for him. Guys, let's talk about something the legislature will undoubtedly take up when they get back together in January. How am I so sure they're going to take it up? Because the Speaker of the House is pushing this bill, so we know at the very least it will be discussed. Now, the idea that Cam Sexton has is that we should pay student teachers in Tennessee as a way to incentivize them to become teachers. We, along with many other states, are having a hard time, attracting people to the profession. But there's a lot of questions in terms of how much we pay them. Did some research in preparation for the show, and I found out that Kentucky, just to our north, pays their student teachers a stipend of $5,000 for essentially 70 days where I'm following Steve, the experienced teacher, to see how he does it, or I come follow you so I get some things as I'm a young teacher. Is that too much money? Can we afford it? Jasper, let's start over there. This sounds like a bill that people on both sides of the aisle could potentially get behind.
It could be, but does it solve the problem? And I think that what we have to start looking at as a state is how do we solve problems instead of putting Band-Aids on major issues. When we're looking at giving student teachers a stipend, what are we doing, for teachers that are in the classroom? I think that's where the issues are, right? Is that do we have enough teachers to accommodate the number of students, and what are we doing to help teachers, and not necessarily throwing money, at the issues. This a few months ago, I traveled to Arkansas, to Bentonville, Arkansas, where they are working on housing for teachers and for those that are in the school system. So that way they're addressing the housing issue, where teachers can do a $1,500 a month lease for 5 years, and at the end of that 5 years, they get a check for $50,000 for a down payment on a home. So I think that we need to be looking at a little bit more innovative ways if they don't want to pay teachers.
Investing in that?
So it's public-private partnerships. So it's the localities along with the foundations, like the Walton Family Foundation, because they're really big in Bentonville, the home of Walmart, and they're looking at expanding that across the South.
I've been to their art museum. If you get over there, it doesn't cost a dime to get in, and it's really something. Chris, you worked at the legislature as well, and he raises some interesting points. Are we doing enough to make it a more lucrative and a more desirable profession?
I would say, look, this is one step solving a problem. There are probably a lot of ways to solve a problem, but kudos to the Speaker. I think one way is you got to put money in people's pockets. Affordability is a main thing. Housing is a main thing. You don't have money, you can't do either. Putting student teachers in a place where maybe they will take a risk to try something that maybe they thought about but had no financial backing to do. Maybe they're willing to step forward. If there's a shortage in teachers, how do we put more people in the pipeline? Not everybody will turn out to be a teacher, but again, how do we at least get people to put a step forward to maybe try? And again, education has been a priority of Republicans for the past 12 years. They certainly have moved the needle. They've moved it further than any Democrat has in the past 25 years. And this is another step forward in moving that needle. And look, they're paying teachers, and they've also put paying teachers in the classroom first with the new formula. So again, it's a step forward. No, it's not perfect. There will be time you'll measure it, and then you'll go back and you'll figure out what's the best thing to do. But it's a step forward, so kudos to the Speaker.
It's interesting. I mean, I thought it was certainly worthy of our conversation because it is a really, really important job. Go ahead, Gracie.
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to give kudos to Speaker Sexton, because the only reason this isn't an obvious decision is because we're funneling $144 million into a voucher program that already benefits families that overwhelmingly could already afford private school and were sending their children to private school which he now also wants to remove the income cap on.
Yes.
So like you mentioned earlier, Kentucky already pays their student teachers $5,000 a year or a semester.
And 10 other states do it too, yes.
Yeah, Colorado pays $22,000 a year to their student teachers. We have a teacher shortage crisis in Tennessee. We've had a 26% decrease since 2020. 2/3 of our student teachers are going into debt to student teach. That is astonishing to me.
They're essentially asking you to work for a couple of months for free at a time when you're already kind of broke.
So this is an obvious first of hopefully many steps.
Steve, I've got less than a minute, but I don't want to steal too much of your time. But I'm not going to cut you off if you have more to say.
I'll say, you got to look at what's the real problem. Is it the top of the funnel? And Gracie's right. We need to get these teachers into the classroom, but we have a bigger problem of they're leaving. Why are they leaving? They're getting beat up by students. They're getting 5-10 years in and realize that the teacher in the classroom next to me who's lousy gets paid the same thing I do, and I may be a super teacher. They look at a certain point in their careers, they can do better leaving teaching and going into something else. I think you got to look at where you're losing them. We got to put them in the funnel, but you got to look at the other issues. And you're exactly right. 144 million into the voucher. It's going to go to twice that. And you look at Florida, you look at Arizona. They are busting the bank doing their programs.
I don't want to leave this topic, but I've got to squeeze in a commercial break. You're watching Nashville in Focus, and we'll be right back. I'll get it out.
You're watching Fox 17 News, Nashville in Focus.
This is such a Big Ten issue, I don't want to rush it. Steve, anything else before we...
Let me just add that the lack of transparency on this is what bothers me more than anything else. We still don't know how many of the students that have gotten the vouchers this year were already in private schools. They're getting ready to do this tier system of moving forward. If you're already there, you get to get the vouchers again this year. Well, we're going to have some graduations. How many of these kids that are getting it are graduating? We don't know that number. The next tier is if you're at a school lunch program level, you can get next in line. If you're making $45,000 or less as a 4-kid family, you can't afford even with the $7,300. So that's fictitious. And then third are people that are making 3 times. So if you're making $120,000, $125,000, yeah, you can get your $7,300. So this just benefits those who are either already in private school, headed to private school, and they won't tell us those numbers.
And I was holding Trace off right before the break. He had another thought.
Just real quick, I wanted to add on to Steve's point. There is a lot of competition around Tennessee. We're here in Middle Tennessee, so we kind of see this maybe as some local teachers going from one county to the next, but we're competing with Georgia. And Georgia's, if you're living in Chattanooga, maybe it might be a better opportunity for you to go across the border, heaven forbid. We can't have that. We have to have the best talent in Tennessee. We're surrounded by states that have competitive programs. So again, and as they talk about changing education in Tennessee as we move forward in the future, as it's completely going to redevelop through vouchers and school savings programs, maybe this is another way we might probably be even talking just about maybe a definition change on who qualifies and how they qualify and how you get money, because there might be a definition of what is a teacher in the classroom and what are they in charge of. So people should be paid for their work. They should be paid appropriately. And if we want good students and we want good education, we got to demand the highest from our teachers. We got to make sure they can afford to do it, but not just afford, but be able to live good lives. Put teachers first.
Yeah, and if we're going to implement a program like this where we're going to incentivize student teachers, what is the incentive for them to remain in the classroom? Like, are we going to give them $5,000 for a part-time job, for them to do while they're finishing up their last semester, in college, and then they're going to go off and choose another career? What are the mechanisms that'll be in place to make sure that we are creating a funnel into the classroom versus just throwing money at an issue?
And affordability is an issue, just so you know. This is going to be another tight year from a budget standpoint. Inflation running close to 3%. Our revenues are projected to come in about a little less than 3% than we had last year, so we already have a math problem, so there are decisions to make. Let's transition to a new topic.
One quick point I want to make that Gracie touched. What are we doing to benefit those who go through this program? How do we keep them in that? Demographics have changed. 40 years ago, Gracie would have been a teacher because she couldn't be a doctor or a lawyer or had other career paths. We literally trapped great people in the classroom because that was their option. We no longer have that. Women have other opportunities. So the biggest funnel of our teachers is now they have other better opportunities. I think you have to recognize the cultural, demographic, and other changes.
Well, the 50s and 60s were a much different
Not that you wouldn't be a
day
great
than we're living in now. No, you make a point. The world has changed. Let's transition to the Department of Children's Services. Another scathing audit. And Steve, you can go first this time. 172 kids spent at least one night in a state office building because we couldn't find a place to put them. The DCS, according to the state's own auditors, dragged their feet in letting you, I, and other members of the public know that we had a child killed, sort of in our custody, if you would. And there were long unexplained delays in investigating an allegation of abuse.
Well, and we've got so many kids that are in such bad situations, whether it's drugs, alcohol, crime, whatever else, and where do we put them? Where do we put them where they're going to be cared for and loved and have a path up? And then it's no fault of the folks at DCS, but our system punishes kids. If you're in the foster care program and you're meeting all the obligations, you're getting your grades, you're doing things right, and then through no fault of your own, you get moved to another family, you go back to the bottom of the list. We're punishing kids who've done the right thing. So again, we've got to rework the whole system to make sure that we're caring for the kids. My son and his wife down in Auburn took a foster child the last month or so. They couldn't even get answers of how do they get this kid into a daycare center. You know, they didn't know his last name for 2 weeks. There is such a bad ineptitude in the systems that are built in because they're overworked and there's too much to do.
And there's an element of that, and I don't want to necessarily rain on the commissioner, who's, I believe, made some headway by all measures, and the legislature's done a decent job. But do you keep somebody in the position, or do you try to, find somebody with even more energy? Your thoughts?
I think the audit was just gutting to go through, of course, and a claim that this is something that just takes time and that they're working on turning the ship around. How do you look at a child who has experienced a lifetime of abuse and tell them, sorry, this is just something that takes time? I think that's deplorable, and this is personal to me. When I was at Belmont, I entered at the Oasis Center in their emergency shelter, which is an amazing organization. They shelter 13 to 17-year-olds who are in and out of DCS custody or in and out of the foster care system or dealing with homelessness, and our interactions with children who had slept on the floor of state offices, which happened at least once every day of the audit, which is unbelievable, except it is believable because this has been the trend.
We knew recently. It was happening. That's why their Periscope was up.
We all have the utmost respect for social workers and caseworkers who are working on this, but there's no excuse for the top-down leadership to be letting us down over and over and over. It's sickening to me.
There's a lot of meat on this bone, but I'm up against a break. We're going to continue the conversation right here. You're watching Nashville in Focus on Fox 17.
You're watching Fox 17 News, Nashville in Focus.
To be fair, on the heels of similar scathing audits in recent years, the legislature has stepped up. They have spent more money, and we have hired more caseworkers, but the numbers are still untenable in terms of how many cases you might be responsible for.
I dealt with a horrible situation when illegal aliens were brought in the middle of the night in Chattanooga. Kids are lost. The program is tough. Look, this is a very tough department. Every commissioner that's been there that I've personally met with, I felt like had the right heart. I don't know if it's a leadership issue, if it's a program issue. Obviously, your heart breaks for the children because at the end of the day, it's about the kids. What we're talking about is organizational, and it's kind of a trial and error at a child's expense. I don't necessarily know if changing staff at the head is the direct answer, or if it's really looking at maybe the way that we find folks, foster homes. Again, what are some of the incentives? Are we doing everything we can to find the best qualified families that maybe didn't know they were the best qualified family? That maybe never stepped forward? What are we doing to find new people? But again, it's always easier said than done. It's very easy to throw stones here because it is about the children and it's very personal to a lot of people. And then it comes down to the state, and we always like to just say, well, the state messes up. So we have to really look at it because somebody can be held accountable. But it's kind of like education. Is it the money or is it the leadership?
Yeah, it's tough, and we're talking about it because it's so important. They have about 4,000 people in DCS. They could probably use 5.
Well, yeah, they could. The numbers also indicate that they are very understaffed, and yes, they've done. Commissioner Quinn has done a great job at working to address the issues. As someone who constantly emails her department
about
around
things.
Issues,
Yeah.
such as this, and having communication and working with them. They're working very hard to address the issues. It's just that they don't have the proper number of support. Each case manager still, can carry anyway, a couple of hundred cases. And as far as one person, to manage and
Nobody's
to handle,
that good.
that's a lot, right? And no one is that good. And you have to think about what it does to them, as a person, to deal with these issues and to sometimes know that their response is not the best
Adequate.
response and is not adequate, and what does it does to them, in their mental psyche, and that's why you have the turnover, rate, and so we have to take a look at, we have a very high unemployment rate, across the country. What can we do to sort of maybe, fill in some of the shortage, of people who are maybe been, let go from the federal government, that are Tennessee residents. Can we attract some of them to fill some of these voids?
As we were talking about education, we also have to look at some of the underlying issues. Part of the philosophy at DCS is to reunite families, which so often means we're putting kids back with drug-addicted, abusive parents. And it's like, you have to judge very carefully, is that really in the best interest of the child, or is it just because we've got our paper adjustment that says, put them back with the family? That may be the worst place to put them.
And a lot of the children do have behavioral issues. And so it's difficult, it's
find
even
them
more
placement.
difficult to find them, placement that they can be for a long period of time.
You got a 17-year-old and you're afraid they're going to murder you in your sleep.
Right, yeah.
And sometimes it's a very legitimate fear.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
They've been traumatized.
Well, it happened in Hollywood.
They've been
it
through
can
a
happen
lot.
anywhere.
I hate to, but I'm up against a commercial break. We're going to take a time out. When we come back, we're going to discuss the latest effort to kill racing at the fairgrounds. We'll be right back.
You're watching Fox 17 News, Nashville in Focus.
This is something you may or may not have been keeping up with, but it's important to consider. The Nashville Fairgrounds had a speedway for about 100 years. About 10, 15 years ago, there was a public referendum where we said, hey, I think we should continue to have racing there. There is a deal on the table to have a major auto racing group that runs a big successful track over in East Tennessee to run this one. But at the same time, there's a competing group who believes that this space in the central part of our town would be better for green space and maybe more affordable housing. Your thoughts on whether we should kill racing or keep it alive, or the thoughts about, I guess, the latest effort to kill it?
Well, I think we do have a racetrack just up the interstate in Lebanon. So I think killing it might be a little bit of a stretch.
We're killing this one.
I live in the Gulch, so I don't have too much skin in the game. But I do know that with how Nashville's pacing and population growth, I think we're going to need 90,000 new units of housing by 2030.
We absolutely do, yeah.
At the minimum. And so my thought is using public land that is already very much an annoyance to the neighborhood groups in the area does seem realistic to me. I think that the obvious solution is to put it to a vote. I think that the mayor has been dragging his feet on it because, and my hunch is that a lot of the neighborhood groups, based off of my experience in
Putting
progressive
pressure on
grassroots organizing, his coalition that got him elected from kind of a long shot is now the coalition that is anti-racetrack, largely. The neighborhood and advocacy groups that are coalescing around this due to the sound. Wedgwood, Houston is a very up-and-coming area, and so using 100 acres of public land for green space and housing, I can see the allure, but I think it should be put to a vote.
In order to get it on the ballot, they have to get 50,000 signatures of people who are registered voters. That seems like pretty tall order.
Well, it is a tall order. It's meant to be a tall order for that reason. It's a big decision. But really, just even weighing in, I love the idea of racing in Nashville. I love the idea. We want to grow that. I think there's more opportunities. We're Nashville. We're its city. We had big races. You said the Gulch, but we are in the Gulch. They were racing all downtown. I think the idea is maybe establish one big speedway. I like the one in Lebanon. I think that should be utilized more. I think there's just tons of opportunity out there. I'm not totally against. I love our fairgrounds, so I want what's best for the fairgrounds. Adding a bunch of houses sounds like we're adding a bunch more people, which is an interesting concept. But maybe there's other use for it, as long as it helps the economic development of our fair and really for the use of the people in Davidson County. I would support. Again, I like the idea of racing. Let's not kill the idea of racing. But that track in Lebanon is amazing, and if this takes away from that opportunity, well, it's just a bad business decision.
Now, I don't want to put the chairman of the Fair Board on the spot, but do you think we'll even have a vote? Or the mayor says he thinks, I don't even think they're going to get the signatures to force a vote.
The people already voted. The people voted already to keep racing.
And I think that people, and then people,
but the people also have to understand that the two racetracks are different. And I think you need to go back and read and understand what the differences are. We're talking about a half-a-mile racetrack
versus 1.3,
right? Versus 1.3 miles. And that's the difference between the Lebanon track and the downtown track. We also have the second oldest racetrack in the country, behind the Milwaukee Mile. So you're talking about doing away with history and the historical context there. And the people who want to get rid of racing are people who have sort of emailed me that says that if I'd known in 2019. When I purchased my home, that there was a racetrack there, then I wouldn't have bought my home there in 2019.
And
my answer is, it's been there since 1904.
Sure.
And so
they don't always make noise.
And so we also have, and like I was saying last week, we have green space, we have affordable housing there on property. We figured out how to do it all, and I think that the people who are against it, it's a small few. It's not everybody, and they're a loud few, but they're a small few because we have just as many people who are coming to us saying that they support the race and they want to keep it there because when they move there,
we're going to have to leave it there because we are flat out of time. Thank you for being here.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you for watching.
Merry
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas.